Grab your favorite alcoholic or non-alcoholic beverage. Unless you're driving, don't drink and drive. And enjoy this episode of Why Complain When You Can Whine. Welcome to Why Complain When You Can Whine, making sense of the senseless, attempting to make sense of toxic nonsense while drinking wine. Although tonight, to be honest, I don't have any wine. I am Dr. Jodi Larman, licensed clinical psychologist in the state of California. Therefore, everything and anything discussed on this podcast is purely for psychoeducation and entertainment purposes only. And normally it is 3 professional women. And tonight, you see, it is only me. And for the past couple of podcasts, we have been missing Heather and Ashley. And so I want to tell you a little bit about the podcast, the history of the podcast, and maybe the future of the podcast as well. Unfortunately, at this point in time, Ashley and Heather's schedules are not conducive to the podcast. Maybe that will change in the future. I hope so. But until then, they're not going to be on the podcast. So it is just going to be me and hopefully guests as well. And I'm going to try to continue to put out the podcast every 2 weeks, maybe every week, if that is even possible. But I'm also going to need your help. I'm going to need your help in topics, questions, things to discuss, potential guests. I need your input. I need your feedback. I want this to be more interactive. And on that note, I wanted to do this podcast tonight to kind of give you guys a backstory on why complain when you can whine, how it got started, why it got started, and what hopefully is the direction it's going to go to next. So back in 2018, a colleague of mine who was just newly licensed, she and I decided to go on YouTube and do weekly YouTube, kind of like a podcast, but there really weren't podcasts at that time that we were thinking of, hey, let's do a podcast. So we were just posting, we had a YouTube channel. And in 2019, we posted several YouTubes, probably a few months worth of weekly YouTubes on keeping it real. And we discussed social media and mental health, kids and mental health diagnoses, and things like that. One thing my colleague got kind of upset with me, though, was because I said on one of our YouTubes that I had bipolar. I was bipolar too. And she had asked me, how in the world, why would you tell anybody that you're bipolar on YouTube? And I said, well, why not? Why would I not want to do that? If we are here, one of my things, the reason I'm on TikTok and just in general is to try to end the stigma of mental health. So if I, with bipolar 2, am too ashamed to say something or have to hide it, that's not the purpose. That's not ending the stigma of mental health. That's kind of continuing with the stigma of mental health. And she said, but what if I worked at the prison at the time? What if your inmates see this? I said, okay, if my inmates are watching this on YouTube, there's bigger problems than them knowing that I am bipolar 2. And newsflash, my inmates have pretty much diagnosed me all on their own. Several of them have told me, oh, Dr. Larman, bipolar 2. So I'm not really too concerned. And it doesn't matter. Again, if my inmates see this, that's a bigger issue. But she was very, very disturbed by that, which disturbed me. But we did these for several months, actually. And then she was a newly licensed clinician. She ended up going to a continuing education seminar on social media and mental health. And at that seminar, they apparently handed out an article. She sent it to me from 2013 that said psychologists and mental health professionals should not be on social media. It is not appropriate. And so that kind of freaked her out as a newly licensed clinician. And I told her, okay, that's from 2013. We are now in 2019. There's been a lot of changes in social media in 6 years. and we're not doing anything unethical. I would never intentionally or unintentionally, if I could help it, do anything unethical or illegal. But it's all psychoeducation. We're just discussing things. But she was very, really ambivalent about going forward. She was kind of freaked out by that continuing education. So out of respect for her, we stopped doing it and I took everything down, unfortunately, because it was a lot of fun. But after that, I wanted to keep going. I wanted to do something like this. And then at the end of 2019, I was approached by a former coworker of mine who I did not realize at the time, because here's the thing about NPD is they can hold the mask if you're not with them all the time. And even though we worked together for about 2 years, he was in one area, I was in another. We didn't interact all the time. And so he asked me if I would do a podcast with him. And at the time, we weren't quite sure how to set up a podcast and everything. So we started out doing Facebook Lives. Now, this is someone who had, he is Latin, he is gay, that is what he's known as. So this is not any secret that I'm sending out, but he wanted to do, he being this very wise in his mind, he said to me, I am the wise gay Latin guy, and I need the doctor to kind of legitimize what we're doing. Okay. Yeah, that sounds like fun. But the thing is, he wanted to be this Mr. Worldwide, know everything. And I was just there. So we did a couple of Facebook Lives. And initially, we were getting some, I guess, really good feedback. He did not, he kept everything separate from me, but he would tell me, oh, everybody loves you. Oh, this is so great. And then I guess after the very first or second live that we did, he said that one of the guys that was a really good friend of his told him that he was walking all over me when I talk. And I said, well, yeah, kind of you are. So he didn't like that. He also didn't like the fact that as a psychologist, I kind of know what I'm doing. And as just a person, but this is the reason he brought me on, he really didn't know. So we were doing these lives and people were asking questions. And if I answered a question and he didn't like the answer because he didn't answer it, he would tell me, I know what they're talking about. And that's not why they're asking. It's like, okay, what do you want me here for? So we did these lives. We were doing them for about a month every week. We did about 4 or 5 of them. And he would drink during the lives. I'd have a glass of wine, but he would have beer and tequila shots. Well, right around New Year's, he came to do a live and he brought his nephew, who was, I think, 15. Now, apparently, this coworker was also in gay porn. So he was the most Googled gay Latino in Los Angeles. And so he says, I don't know. But he said, my nephew knows nothing of my past. Please don't say anything. And I said, I'm that okay, but that kind of hinders how we do our Facebook Live because people supposedly know who you are and we can't really talk about these things. But okay, no problem. So he was at my house with his nephew and I had just got my cat and we had a fish. I had a fish and there's a moral to this story. Just bear with me. So I had a fish and the fish was on the counter in my kitchen. And while we were starting to get our lives set up and everything, the cat jumped on the counter and started to go for the fishbowl. So I yelled at my son who was like, Mom. And I'm like, get the fucking cat. So my son, he was like frozen and I got the cat and I moved her off. End of story. That was all that happened. So we did the live. It's not a problem. Everything went well. And then after the live, he asked me a question and he said, I have a friend who's HIV positive and he wants to go to therapy, but he only wants an HIV positive clinician. Is that something that, should he be that way? And I said, well, honestly, if that's his preference, then yeah, I mean, he may not be able to find one. I don't know. But yeah, if that's his preference. And he goes, well, does he need an HIV positive clinician? I said, honestly, no, he really doesn't, because you don't need to. There are things that it is better if you go through it. Like, I am a widow. I went to bereavement counseling. The person running the counseling, the facilitator, the psychologist there, had only been divorced. She had never lost a spouse. So she was very clueless in a lot of the stuff that was being said. For example, one of the women, we were talking about paying bills, and she said, she was an elderly lady, and she said, I don't even know how to write a check at this point. And so the facilitator was like, oh, well, that's easy. I just got a friend of mine who had also been through a divorce, and she showed me all the things that I needed to do that I really didn't know what to do. And I stopped and I said, okay, that's not really what she's saying. What she's really saying is, out of all of these years of marriage, her pretty much entire life, her spouse, has been doing all of these things. So even if she theoretically knows how to do it, she doesn't know how to do it at this point. She's lost. She has lost her person. And the therapist, the clinician, was like, oh. So in matters like that, yes, it really does matter if your clinician has been there before. But in other things, it doesn't matter. They can very much relate if they've had relatable experiences. So I was telling this to my friend, and I said, so it doesn't matter if that's what he wants, but does he need it? Absolutely not. Because even if he had a clinician who had exactly the same thing, but went about it in a completely different way, they're still not going to relate then, because he went this direction, he went that direction, the outcome might be different. So it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be able to relate. The best outcome of therapy is the rapport between the client and clinician. And I don't know what it was, but that pissed my coworker, my friend, whatever you want to call him, off. Like, the 6 beers and 6 shots that tequila shots he already had was probably the reason why. And he had more before he got to my house. But in the time of being my house, he had 6 tequila shots and 6 beers. And he said, you're not answering my question. And I was like, I thought I was. And he goes, if you're going to disrespect me like that, I'm gone. I'm out of here. And he grabs his nephew and they start to leave. And I'm sitting at the bar stool at my counter. They were at my island, and they were standing on the other side. So they get up and they start storming out. And then my son and I are like, what the fuck? Okay. So he walks out, slams the door. That was it. And I thought, okay, he's going to sober up, cool down. It'll be fine. The next day I realized he's got he's just not egocentric and full of himself. He's got huge NPD tendencies and traits, and maybe full on NPD. I woke up in the morning and all day long to a barrage of texts about what an awful person I was, how he actually wanted me because I was a doctor, but I didn't act doctor enough. I don't know what that means, but he reiterated that numerous times throughout the day. And then he also said that I twice in our 16-year friendship threw my doctorate in his face. So I'm like, wait a minute, you wanted me to be a doctor. I'm not doctor enough, but I've thrown my doctor in your face twice in 16 years. I'm so confused right now. And he said that none of his friends liked me. They all thought I was the crazy white lady on the videos. And that gave me a clue that I think I was getting too close to his territory. They were starting to give me the compliments and not him. And that, if you know NPD, it's going to piss him the fuck off. So I was like, oh, okay, that tells me right there, when you start saying that and all the emails that we're getting, you're awful. When before you were telling me all the emails we were getting, I was great and your friends like me. But okay. So he just all day long were sending me these texts. And a friend of mine came over and I started showing her the text, and it dawned on me, like at that moment, for some strange reason, I was like, oh my God, these are the same types of text my ex would send. They were Darvo big time, accusing me of all sorts of stuff, yelling at me. And I would say to him, I'm really sorry that you're feeling this way. Let's discuss this. Then he had the nerve to say, and this was kind of the end of it. He said that when I yelled at my son, and he's known my son since he was 2, that when I yelled at my son, he thought, oh my God, I am the worst mother in the world, child abuse. And he thought I was going to beat my son. We were totally on other ends of the kitchen. And he was going to have to call Child Protective Services. It's like, wow, okay. And his nephew was terrified of me, thought that I was going to attack the both of them. Like, where the fuck is this coming from? I asked my son, I'm like, I was just sitting on a bar stool, wasn't I? And my son's like, yeah, you were just sitting there. I'm like, I thought so. This makes no sense. And again, I said, hey, let's discuss this. I don't recall this ever happening, but if it bothers you, let's talk about it. He blocked me. I have not heard from him since 2000. I am fine. But after that, I really, 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 really wanted to continue doing a podcast at this point. I really wanted to. I love doing it, but I wanted to find people that were going to be reliable, that were going to be intelligent enough to do this, that were going to have the wherewithal to know that this is going to be fun, it's going to be informative, have the education, like Heather's a therapist, Ashley's a domestic violence survivor, that had the intellect and ability to do this, and that we also get along, have the same like mentality and mindset. So when I met Heather and Ashley last summer, or a little bit before last summer, I started thinking about they would probably be really fun to do this with. So I asked them both if they would be interested in doing this podcast. And I told them what I wanted to do. I've had this name in my head because I have a wine station in my kitchen that when my kitchen was redone, I kept a piece of the tile. I painted it with chalkboard paint. And every once in a while, I changed the little sayings on it in my wine station. And right now it says, why complain when you can whine? And they were like, oh, that would be great. Let's do that. So that's how it came about. And I was really excited, really happy. We were just, I think, really getting the flow. I think our personalities work super well together. I think we all have something that's a little bit different, but just as important to add to this podcast. But once we got to about the summertime, about September, the end of summer, unfortunately, their schedules changed such that the podcast was no longer conducive to the direction they were going and what they were doing. So I had to decide, do I want to keep this going? We're having so much fun. We're just starting to get the momentum, and it's been a year, and it's been a lot of fun, and we've been through a lot. If you know, we have been through a lot in that year, but unfortunately, they weren't able to. So this is where we are now. And I really do want to keep the podcast going. I love doing it. I had a lot of guests lined up. Unfortunately, with stuff that's going on in the world today, some of them weren't able to now take that commitment either because other things are more pressing, which I completely understand. Because for me, it's also a little bit more difficult there's things that I would love to discuss on this podcast, but right now it's still me, Heather, and Ashley. So I'm not going to put my own views out there without allowing them also. And I'm not going to speak for them. So until I know the outcome of what's going to happen with the podcast, I am not going to be sharing my views, although I would love to. But so some of the guests we've had to actually cancel. But we do have guests. I do have guests. I guess I should say I do have guests, and I really do want to keep this going. It is a little bit more difficult for me because I love the interaction. I love responding and being able to have that immediate feedback that I don't have right now. Although I can talk for hours, and I think we all kind of figured that one out. I can talk for hours. It's a lot harder to talk to yourself with absolutely no feedback and no one to bounce anything off. So I'm going to do my best, but that again is where I need your guys' help. Questions. Send me your questions. wcwycw1@gmail.com. You can send it to me directly at TikTokPsychDrJ@gmail, or you can also put them in the comments. Any questions, if they're reasonable. I mean, if they're in good faith questions, then yes. If they're just, you're trying to be a dick, gonna be honest, then no, I'm just going to ignore those. But send questions, send topics, send ideas. I want your feedback. I would love to do live podcasts as well. So I want to keep this thing going. I would love if Ashley and Heather are done with whatever their schedules, if they can find time, come back. I'm not adverse about that at all. I would love that. But for now, I do want to keep this going and try really hard to build it again. We have over 500 something followers, and I appreciate each and every one of you. But again, I need your help, guys. So like, share, follow, comment, everything. And let me know what you think as well. Should I continue without them? Should I revamp it? Again, they're always welcome. I don't want to just stop. I really don't. And I'm hoping that they're able to come back. But until then, what do you guys want? What would you guys like to see? Let me know. Okay. And next time I am going to be doing, I do have guests. I will tell you that. But do you want me to do them also by myself? And I'm probably repeating myself. That's another thing. That's why it's more difficult. But send me your feedback. Let me know. And I'm going to try to keep doing these bi-weekly if I can, bi-weekly, every 2 weeks. And thanks for bearing with me, guys. I appreciate all of you. And it is the day after Thanksgiving. So I am going to say I am thankful for everybody who watches, who shares, who likes, and who subscribes. Because that's what I want to see. And that's what I would love to keep doing this. And I don't know what the hell just happened to my camera. It just kind of, yeah, again, it's not a podcast if something stupid doesn't happen with me. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to listen and watch. And I really, really, really hope to hear from you guys soon. Happy late Thanksgiving. I hope you guys all had a great one. And I am thankful for all of you.